Hello and welcome to Pock and Rob. Today's video I'm starting a brand new series that I'm calling Revisited. These are going to be intermittently put out and they are going to be a video where I revisit one of my, usually a ranking list from a previous video. And to kick the whole lot off, I'm going to go back to one of my earliest videos that I put out in January 21, and it was my top 15 albums of 2020, the pandemic year. Now, this list has definitely changed. I'm expanding it to a top 20 to reflect the fact that there are 4 or 5 albums that have found their way into this list that weren't there before because I've not listened to them, and a few that actually have slipped down the rankings because I haven't listened to them since. Before I do all of that, please do remember, click the thumbs up to like the video, hit the subscribe button, that really helps me out, and click the bell for notifications of future content. So let's kick off with what I've placed at number 20, which has tumbled out of the top 15, and it's Hotspot by the Pet Shop Boys. I do like the Pet Shop Boys a great deal. I remember being quite fond of this album and it feeling familiar, but I don't think I've listened to it since I made that video 2 years ago. My fondness for the Pet Shop Boys, however, means that if I do go back and listen to it, I know I'm still going to enjoy it. So Hotspot by the Pet Shop Boys at number 20. Number 19 is an album that didn't get a mention last time round, but I remember enjoying, but just not enough to get it into the top 15. And that's Songs for Our Daughter by Laura Marling. This was a really, really pleasant folk rock kind of music album. I thought it was really, really fine. Songs for Our Daughter, Laura Marling. Number 18 is this one. Didn't make it in last time round. I have definitely listened to it 2 or 3 times since. Still don't think it's top draw though. Hey Clockface by Elvis Costello. It's fine. And I believe that's more or less what I said in my Elvis Costello mega ranking that I did earlier this year. There's some good tracks on here, and Hetty O'Hara Confidential is probably the best thing on it. It's fine for a Costello album, but good for almost anyone else. And number 17 is an artist I've been listening to quite a lot recently, and this was their most recent album. It's Rough and Rowdy Ways by Bob Dylan. This did not make it into my top 15 last time round. However, like I say, I've been listening to a lot of Bob Dylan. It's rekindled an interest in it. The reason it doesn't make the top 15 is simple. Murder Most Foul, a 22-minute track that closes the album. It's side 4. I find it just a bit boring, if I'm honest. However, the rest of it is typical classic Bob Dylan. Rough and Rowdy Ways at number 17. Right, just outside my top 15 at number 16 is Paul Heaton and Jackie Abbott's Manchester Calling. This is the deluxe version that comes with a second full album's worth of material. Manchester Calling is typical Heaton and Abbott. It will have great lyrics, it will have great performances, and I will struggle to remember a lot of it. But I will, whenever it goes on, enjoy it. I always enjoy Heaton and Abbott's work. Manchester Calling, number 16. Into my top 15, and this was in the top 10. It's tumbled out a little bit. It is Power Up by AC/DC. This was touch and go whether or not it was going to be this or Heaton and Abbott that made the top 15. In the end, I remember I just enjoy balls to the wall rock and roll that AC/DC do. And Power Up is classic AC/DC, number 15. And number 14 is Beyond the Pale by Jarvis. This is the best thing that Jarvis Cocker has done since probably This Is Hardcore by Pulp. Pulp are, of course, in music news at the moment because they've announced Reformation to do some gigs. But Beyond the Pale, this is a really fine Jarvis Cocker record. And because of its appearance on my list, a friend of mine went out, bought the record, and he said he thoroughly agreed with me. It was an album that had passed him by that year, and he discovered it as a result of that video in 2021. And perhaps you'll discover it if you haven't listened to it as a result of this video. Beyond the Pale by Jarvis. And number 13 is a band that I have very little objectivity about. it's The Fizz, aka 3/4 of Bucks Fizz. So that's Mike Nolan, Jay Aston and Cheryl Baker. The reason I don't have any objectivity is because listening to this style of music, this kind of music, always catapults me back to being 7 years old, the Eurovision Song Contest in 1981, and the first album I ever fell in love with. Smoke and Mirrors is a really fine pop album, but if you like Bucks Fizz, it's a terrific album. Number 13. Number 12 is a record that I already owned at the time I did the video on 2020, but it hadn't clicked with me. It's finally clicked. It's Deacon Blue's City of Love. Now, I'm a big Deacon Blue fan. I've got some plans to do some videos purely on Deacon Blue singles and albums and favourite tracks. There will definitely be tracks of my years that I do on Deacon Blue. City of Love, like I said, I didn't like it particularly in 2020, but it's grown on me, particularly that great title track. And City of Love has found its way into my top 20 albums of 2020. And number 11, falling down the rankings a little bit, I think it was just inside the top 10, is Chris Tomlin and Friends. So Chris Tomlin is an American worship songwriter. He's written, in my opinion, the best worship song of the last 20 years, which is How Great Is Our God. This is a country album. As a result of this album, I've explored the music of Lady A, who appear on track 4 of this record. And it's not massively memorable, but I do know that when I put on Chris Tomlin and Friends, I have a great time. I like, as you possibly know from other videos, I like southern rock country music, and this is southern rock country music. Chris Tomlin and Friends, my number 11. Now into the top 10. Letter to You by Bruce Springsteen. Now, I said on my video originally that every time I listen to a Bruce Springsteen record, it reminds me how good he is. I should listen to them more often. I haven't followed my own advice, but Letter to You, I do remember being great, and House of 1,000 Guitars is a terrifically good song. As was The Power of Prayer, which also stands out. Now, I got this sometime after I'd done the video. It's one of those ones where it's a 3-sided album and the 4th side is an etching, and that always gets on my wick. But Letter to You at number 10. And number 9 is an album I don't own, but I do keep an eye out for it. It is Young Dumb Thrills by McFly. Now, this has gone up on my rankings. I've listened to this several times since, and I've enjoyed it every time. I do think the guys from McFly are great songwriters, and every time I listen to it, when you get in stuff like Tonight Is the Night and another song about love, it's just a good time pop rock album. So, Young Dumb Thrills at number 9. And number 8 is an album that my son now owns. It was one of his birthday presents because he really likes this style of music. And he also really quite likes this artist. It's Gary Barlow, Music Played by Humans. This is a swing album of original compositions. The opening track is Who's Driving This Thing, which is just joyful. Incredible's a great song. The Kind of Friend I Need, which features James Corden, is humorous. Bad Liebran is a great song. Music Played by Humans is a really, really fine album. My son has got his own vinyl copy of this now because it was on a great offer around about the time of his birthday. It's my number 8. And number 7 is an album that has slipped slightly, but I still thoroughly enjoy it. It was my favourite Christian album of 2020, and it remains my favourite Christian album of 2020. It's Holy Water by We the Kingdom. They've also got a new album out, and as a result, I will have to revisit this again just to kind of see how much I enjoy it in comparison to their second album, which is just called We the Kingdom. Holy Water is a great track, as is Cages, which opens the record, and Child of Love is the best track on here. Really, really enjoy Child of Love. Number 7, We the Kingdom, Holy Water. And number 6 is an album that was not in my top albums of 2020 originally. I had not listened to it. I had no real interest in listening to it. And then I heard its most famous track. And as a result, I've got it. It's After Hours by The Weeknd. Blinding Lights is a blinding song. Absolutely phenomenal. But so is Save Your Tears, which is on... They're both on side 3 of this record. The whole album is really fine pop music. And I really, really have been surprised by how much this album grabbed me over the last year or so. As you can see, liked it so much, got a copy. Number 5 is another album that I didn't have in my 2020 list because I hadn't heard it. And it's Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa. Now, I've heard Dua Lipa songs before, and as a result, I kind of didn't really have much interest in it. What a great album. I listened to this very shortly after I'd made that video, and I realised this really should have been in there. It's been very highly acclaimed as a great pop album. Great pop tracks like Don't Start Now and Levitating. And then closing off the album, Boys Will Be Boys. I think Boys Will Be Boys is one of the very best tracks of 2020. Now, I didn't do a best track of the year like I did for 2021. I'm glad I didn't, because actually Boys Will Be Boys might well have been the song that should have won. And I would have regretted not actually having heard the album at the time. The reason I'm doing the revisiting is because of albums like After Hours and Future Nostalgia that passed me by last time. Future Nostalgia, number 5. Number 4 is an album that I'd originally placed as my number 2 album of the year. I still love it as much as I did when I first heard it, and it's the album in this list that I've listened to more than any other, because it's Paul McCartney, and it's McCartney 3. McCartney 3 is... It's a top 10 McCartney album for me. I still think it's absolutely great. I could live without Deep Deep Feeling being quite as long as it is, and Deep Down is probably the only real misstep on the record. But it's tumbled down from number 2 for a reason, and that is, I think I've grown to love 3 other albums just that little bit more than McCartney 3. Now, this remains for me a great McCartney record. It's just number 4 now. And number 3 is an album I don't own. I would like the vinyl of this. It's a band that I have been aware of for quite a while. I do own their second album on vinyl. I would like to own this. It's Strange Days by The Struts. This is great glam style rock. And if you don't know who The Struts are, they're a band that come from Derby. The lead vocalist is Luke Spiller, who has just got one of my favourite voices in all of rock music. He sang the entirety of all of the lead vocals on Mike Oldfield's Man on the Rocks album. And then we had the first Struts album, the second Struts album, and then this third one, Strange Days, which was recorded during lockdown. It features guest vocals from Robbie Williams on the opening track, Strange Days. It also features fantastic guest vocals from Joe Elliott from Def Leppard on I Hate How Much I Want You. This is a really good time rock pop record. Strange Days by The Struts. At number 2, I placed the album that I'd originally had at number 1 from 2020. It's Evermore by Taylor Swift. Great songwriting throughout this album. It contains my favourite Taylor Swift song, which is probably why I originally put it as my number 1 album of the year. And that is Nobody No Crime. Also on here are things like Champagne Problems and Dorothea and Coney Island. It's a great songwriting album. and all the more remarkable given the fact that this was her second double album release of the same year, because at number 1 is its sister album, Folklore. Am I a Swiftie? I don't know. But what I am appreciative of is just how good this woman's songwriting was in 2020. Comfortably, the 2 best albums of the year by the same artist is almost unheard of. And Folklore in particular. I just think the songwriting on Folklore has the edge, and thematically as a whole it works ever so slightly better than Evermore. But if I could have put them both number 1, I possibly would have done. Number 1, Folklore by Taylor Swift. So that concludes this revisiting of the 2020 top 15, now top 20 albums of the year. Let me know in comments below what you think of it. Let me know what your favourite 3, 4 or 5 albums were of that entire year. Is there anything that's changed or moved in your affections? Love to hear about it. Let me know in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe and hit the bell. I'll be back in a week with another video. But until then, thanks for watching.